Good morning, my friends. It's Heather Dunlop here with Thriving Woman. And what I want to talk about today is the nightmare. If you're like me, you had nightmares that woke you up clenched with this scream just caught in your throat because you were just reliving it over and over and over. And it just wouldn't leave your brain. And to the point where when you're walking around during the day, all of a sudden it was like having night terrors while you're awake. You would just see the images and see everything and remember the sounds and the touch and how helpless it felt in that moment because you were being overpowered and you were things were being done to you against your will. And you have those nightmares and you wake up with that scream caught in your throat and you're just reliving it day after day after day. That was happening to me. That actually happened to the point where I would wake up in the middle of the night. Actually, not wake up, I would sleepwalk and I would put on clothes and I would put on more clothes and more clothes. And I would wake up and I would have my pajamas, I'd have a pair of pants, a jacket, another pair of pants, another shirt, and I'd have all these layers on. And I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be like, what happened last night? And then one day I realized, because I did it during the day when I was taking a nap, I was exhausted. I fell asleep at like 6 o'clock at night, woke up, not woke up, but was sleepwalking and did this and went back to bed. And my family was like, what did you do? And I just said, what are you talking about? I had no recollection of what I had actually done when I was sleepwalking and putting on all these extra layers of clothes. And I was putting on those clothes to protect myself because I felt so vulnerable because I was living that night terror over and over and over and just reliving it. So, what happened? How did I go from reliving that nightmare day after day, during the night, those sounds in my head, that horrible feeling of helplessness, that horrible feeling of being overpowered and intimidated years after it had stopped, many years. I mean, we're talking, 10 years later. How did I stop reliving it? I worked with someone and I figured out some ways to actually address it and face it head on because avoiding it obviously wasn't working because it was showing up in my nightmares. So I had to face it head on. And I chose to do that. And I want you to consider doing that yourself, confronting it. Because once you confront it, the power of it diminishes. And when that power diminishes, you can start to think clearly again. And you get to start to work on what's going on in your brain. What are these things, these thoughts, these automatic reactions that are coming up? How do I take that and remove that and put in something that I actually want? So, how did I get rid of those nightmares and those night terrors? I worked on figuring out why these things were coming up and how to remove them. You see, I went through a number of things. I did a number of processes to release the past. And the great thing about the work that was done and the work I do with my clients about releasing the past is we actually break that thought so that it no longer has an automatic reaction or response, right? We get to choose how we respond. We get to choose a new response and make that new response our new automations and our new beliefs. So we go in there and we work with the way the brain works. It's not just words. It's not just saying, oh, I have to remember that thought and change it when it comes up. It goes so much deeper than that. The work that we can do together goes in there and says, I've talked about this before, those those connections that are in there, those automations that are so cemented in our brain, we actually get to loosen them up so that we get some gaps and pull them apart. And we pull them apart so far that that automatic thought no longer can make the jump So we no longer have that same reaction. And we get to choose a new thought and create a new response. And that's how I overcame the nightmares and the night terrors. You see, today I can talk about what I experienced. I can talk about how I was molested as a child and how I was overpowered and how I felt helpless in that moment. And I can remember it and I don't relive it. So I want to ask you, do you want to get to the point where you remember instead of reliving? Do you want to remember it and not have that emotional breakdown because you're not automatically responding? You're not automatically reacting to something that's just firing off in your brain on its own without your permission. You see, that's what happens. 90% of what we do, the things that we decide and the responses that we get, the actions that we take, they run on autopilot. And 90 to 95% possibly of everything that we do is automated. And that's why I would wake up and I'd be like, how in the world did I end up with 3 extra layers of clothing on my body when I went to sleep just wearing pajamas last night? How the heck did that happen? It was the automations. It was those automations running while I was sleeping, and they took over. And my defense, what my brain thought was keeping me safe, was to put on more clothes because it's a barrier between me and touching my body, right? It was something between me. It's a way for me to hide, was to put on extra clothing. So I want to ask you, if you're at the point where you want to remember without reliving that nightmare day after day, whether you're awake or you're asleep, and you want those automations that are coming up and causing these reactions, these nightmares to come up, if you want all of that to stop, and I mean stop, not just put a band-aid on it so temporarily it holds it together. Let's go in there and let's remove those old automations that are causing the nightmares. Together we can do that. So I'm going to put a link below. You can schedule a call on my calendar. It's a free 15-minute coaching call, and let's see. Let's get to work on this. Let's go deeper on what's going on with you and the automations that are causing your nightmares to come up. And if you prefer, put the comment below. Just comment Thriver. I'll know what you're talking about. Or DM me Thriver, and I'll get in touch with you for sure. This is Heather Dunlop. Always remember, you have strength within you.